I'm butchering people's names. I do think apparently.
Just ask the. Just want to have this in the background before I start. Oslo Accords is started in 1993. I apologize if you can't see it all. And this takes us to 2013. It shows the number of homes built in the West Bank. It shows the $6.3 billion investment from the Israeli government. And it shows the different negotiation rounds during this process. And thank you, Marco, for putting this together. Ladies and gentlemen, previous speakers have covered much of what needs to be said about the need, overdue need, for a change in the ALP policy on the issue of Israel and Palestine. They will, if they change, they will barely catch up with the rest of the world when it comes to these issues of peace in that region. Now, where peace invokes a sense of cynicism, betrayal and pain in the memory of many Palestinians and those who support them, because it's linked to another word, and the other word is process, which was the outcome of the Oslo. They would say the well-known Palestinian scholar was one of the first to warn the Palestinian negotiations about a flawed agreement and a dishonest process. While peace has such a negative tone, the alternative is much worse. It's the continuation of the brutal occupation, the killing of the Palestinians with impunity. It's the demolitions of tens of thousands of homes. It's the arrests of children. It's turning Gaza, the Gaza Strip, into the largest prison in the world. It's everything you have heard. It is worse than apartheid. This time last year, Gaza was under a relentless bombardment for 51 days, while the world watched and did nothing. We all felt the helplessness of not able to stop the killing and destruction. Despite all of this, I, among many, still have hope. And I assure you, Sivan, we didn't talk before this. She didn't know what I'm going to talk about hope. But hope for peace and not war, hope for humanity and not barbarism, hope for freedom and not occupation and apartheid, hope for honesty and not double standard, hope for action and not lip service. My sense of hope is also born by the realism that 57% of Australians who were surveyed want their government to support the freedom of the Palestinians. Also born by the hope of more than 80% of those who support the cause of Palestine in Australia and vote for the ALP candidates. At least 8 seats hold by Labour. The votes are critical. They all hope that their trusted representatives will support fair goal for the Palestinians. I saw today there's a fair goal for all in the title, in the screen of that conference. Support and respect for international law when it comes to Palestine and every other aspect. Supporting the oppressed and vulnerable and act on their rhetoric to end occupation and free the Palestinians. Friends, supporters of justice for the Palestinians know that Labour has the power to do the right thing and not miss this perhaps historic opportunity to join with the rest of the world and send a loud and resounding message. Palestine should and will be free. Thank you.
Thank you to all 4 of the speakers. Now the floor is open, friends and comments. If you wish to ask a question or wish to make a comment. Yes, John.
I was brought up in Glasgow, and there's many.
Can you say, sorry, John, can you say?
John Kirkpatrick. I live north of Gympie, north of Brisbane, and here is the delegate to the conference. the Glasgow had many Jewish refugees, Poles, Italians, and they were making their way to North America, but they decided to stay because it was a decent place. And if you think centuries prior to that, the Templars were kicked out of Palestine. They got into Malta, they were kicked out there. Where do they go? It's either Portugal or Scotland, and they came to Scotland. So I think we've got to look at this situation with the Jews in Israel, that they were knocked out of millions and countless millions of lives in the Second World War, and we know how that happened. And you could imagine how they must have felt, we've got to get out of this. And they went to Palestine as it was. And they had an enclave, and then in 48 they expanded. And okay, I agree they've overexpanded, but what they have done is also included many Palestinians. And by the way, I'm not Jewish, I'm an agnostic. So they have included many Palestinians who are willing to come along with the state. There's no bias against them, as far as I'm aware. Well, maybe you've seen otherwise. And they've got involved in how to change the desert green with the various schemes they have. So, yes, in Jerusalem there's a problem, and in Gaza they're crammed into that small space. So that's got to be sorted out, but please, there are two arguments to this.
Thank you,
The two sides.
Is there any other points or questions that people would like to make? Yes, I've got lady at the back. Can you tell us who you are? And,
yeah, Alex Smithson, Coalition of Women for Peace, Israel, Palestine, Women in Black, Israel, Australia and Palestine. Just in response to the last guy who speak, my Palestinian friends in Israel, my Israeli Palestinians, work at changing their accent so that they can be a little bit more Jewish, so they won't get discriminated against. I was there for the last elections, and Jewish Israelis and non-Jewish Israelis, those who are pro, one state, two state, all felt that when Netanyahu got in, it was the end of the future of Israel. And they're going to be looking at moving to Germany and other countries around the world, because Israel at this moment has the most extreme right-wing fascist state. I am a very strong supporter of boycott, sanctions and disinvestment. I come from a background of the Holocaust, and it's because of the Holocaust that I'm furious and really supportive of the Labour Party taking a position. There's an argument that we shouldn't impose. Well, Israel was imposed in 48, and if it was good enough in 48, it's good enough now for the Australian Labour Party to turn around and say justice, social justice equals equality for all. And what I get as a Jewish Israeli should be accessible to every single Palestinian, including the right of return. And there are issues, there are many issues, because when you look at Palestine and you look at the history of Israel, you see 500,000 Jews now living in occupied Palestine, okay? That's not successive governments thinking, I want to create peace. That's successive Israeli government saying, I don't want to do peace. And Miko Peled, who was the son of Mati Peled, who fought in the 67 war, thought that after 67, we should be able to negotiate peace.
Sure.
So, sorry.
Well, no, thank you very much. I'll have a person who was on this side of the table, or that person, the gentleman here with his hand up with the tie on. Yes, you're one of the few people wearing a tie, so.
I'm also a member of APAN. My name's Jamie Pearce. I have a simple question. It's one I regularly ask. I've asked Peter Beinhardt, I've asked can you set out what anyone here could see a simple, plausible scenario for the establishment of a two-state solution?
Thank you. anybody like to take that off?
Nothing is simple. I mean, that's obvious.
Maybe plausible will be fine.
Yeah. Well, number one, application of international law. International law is that which has been laid down by the United Nations and is set in the courts. And Israel is constantly in flagrant denial of obfuscation with international law. Number two, in relation to international law, that there was a withdrawal of the occupation. I don't know whether you realise or not, but the settlers, the illegal settlers on the West Bank actually live under Israel's civil law. The indigenous people of the West Bank live under military law. I mean, it's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. And so the withdrawal of the occupation, and then, as Dr. Ashrawi has said, as humbling as, and in a sense as humiliating as it is, to accept the 67 borders. The 67 borders give Palestinians only 22% of historic Palestine, but they have said that they will accept that. Israel is even denying them that. So it's withdrawal of the occupation, probably the establishment initially of the United Nations peacekeeping force, the abiding of international law on both sides, and the acceptance with some swaps of the 67 borders.
Sivan, would you?
I just wanted to say, you asked for a simple solution. There is no simple
Plausible will do.
simple or plausible. It's like how do you do a good divorce? You can't. There is no simple way to do it. It's very hard work, and that's just two people. So, from my experience anyway. But it's not very. There's no simple way. We want a magic simple way. It's 70 years almost now since both peoples are bearing terrible responsibility and burdens for a terrible problem, and it just needs to start with international pressure to come out of this cycle and to start a new cycle. And just like with South Africa, they're now 20 years into a new cycle. It's a very, very complex and plausible eventually.
Well, just very briefly, right?
I'm sorry, I'm aware.
Happen, that's all.
Sorry, I'm aware that we're running very rapidly out of time, and I don't want to abuse the privileges of the chair.
Thanks. I'll just offer a very quick comment. The much maligned Oslo Agreement really did help to define the central issues that need negotiation. And they're still there. There's been intensive negotiation on some of them, at least until the early 2000s. And so they still provide the basis, the framework for any peace. Forget about Oslo, call it something else, but the basis is still there. Just can I offer a quick comment on, I think it was John's comment. Okay, Israel has achieved a lot. If you wanted to continue to achieve a lot, the only way you can guarantee its security is through Palestinian statehood. It's open and shut in life.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add what George's saying. When we talk about international law, we talk about existing Security Council resolutions, unanimous Security Council. If we talk about those today, 242, 338, and 191, we solve the problem. And I think no one in Australia, in the ALP party, or anywhere else, who should say that international law and UN should be ignored for so long and not be adopted. And 191 will also talk about the refugee and the right of returns.
I had a question over here. Yes, please.
Just a simple question. My name is Mark Furlong. I'm a member of APAN, but very recently. Really simple question. I'm really troubled by the use of the word settler. I think it really strikes me as being very parallel to the terra nullius idea in Australia. Is there an alternative to the word settler that actually puts the right valence on that word, or on the action?
It's been suggested that the term colonist might be appropriate.
The term itself, I think, is derived at least in part from some of the UN language, where it talks about the illegality of settling one's own civilian population in occupied territory. So I think that's really, so it's become a shorthand term. I agree with you. It makes it glossy.
We have 2 minutes, and of course I'd like to thank people before we conclude that a friend here is a good assistant. Because they're very aggressive in booting us out at the appointed time. So
Okay, I'll be very quick.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for not standing up. My name is Yusuf. I just want to say one thing about the price of statelessness. Normally ignored in the talk about one state, two state, etc., which is basically the ex-Iraq or ex-Syria or anything of political, when any country and the neighboring countries go through political unrest, then the Palestinian refugees in that country have to flee. Now, had we had a state, there would have been a place for them to go to instead of being scattered over and over and over again. And we're talking about, for instance, ex-Syria or ex-Yarmouk camp, about 90,000 of them who would have found a place to go to instead of just being stranded in neighboring countries and being treated like second-class refugees as opposed to other Syrian refugees. So the price of statelessness is very high humanitarian as well.
Sorry, look, I am very sorry, but you might have noticed that there's a person just sort of working at the back trying to wrap us up, and they will terminate us. And what I would like to suggest to you before I give the call to George to thank you for your attendance and to thank the fellow speakers is that this dialogue has to continue. As I've suggested, this can go on. We could probably go on all night, and I hope that it does. And there's coffee and what have you around here, and perhaps that might be appropriate. But I could only add my thanks, but George, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as the president of APAN, and on behalf of the Jewish community too, thank you so much for being present and for being interested in this vital topic. I'm personally very grateful to John because he's raised an important point, and that is that those of us who are at this meeting are not against Israel. Are not against Israel. There has to be an outcome which is best for Israel and for Palestine. And in the view of APAN, that outcome for Israel is a free and independent and autonomous Palestine. And unless until there is, this conflict will continue and it'll be terrible for everybody and for the global community. So what we're asking for is something which we believe is in everybody's best interest. And please God, that might be so. But thank you very, very much for your attendance, and go the resolution tomorrow.
Yes.